The first night I arrived at the Blackcrest Pack territory, the air smelled of pine needles and unspoken rules. Autumn had painted the forest in amber and crimson, but there was nothing warm about the way the pack members stared as I walked through their gathering. My pale blonde hair, the most noticeable thing about me, caught the firelight, making me feel even more exposed, a human among wolves, a fragile creature in a den of predators. "The human healer," they whispered, their voices carrying on the wind. Some sneered. Others simply looked through me as if I were made of mist. I clutched my grandmother's leather-bound book of remedies against my chest. The weight of it was comforting, a talisman connecting me to a woman who had taught me that gentleness wasn't weakness, that healing hands could be stronger than claws. "When the world bares its teeth, Alara," she'd said, "offer it medicine instead of fear." Tonight was the autumn equinox, when the pack traditionally presented their offerings to the Alpha King. Warriors displayed their kills. Craftsmen showed intricate carvings. Mothers proudly displayed strong children. Everyone had something valuable to contribute. Except me. With my small bundle of herbs and knowledge that seemed trivial among creatures who could heal broken bones within days. As I approached the massive bonfire at the center of the clearing, I felt the weight of a stare. Not the casual dismissal of the others, but something focused and intentional. I turned my head slightly and nearly stumbled. He sat on a throne of wood and antlers, elevated on a stone dais. Even seated, there was no mistaking his size. Shoulders broad enough to block out the moon, hands that could crush a man's windpipe with minimal effort. But it wasn't his physical presence that made my breath catch. It was his eyes, amber ringed with gold, ancient and knowing, like they had witnessed centuries of bloodshed. They were fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. King Drake, alpha of all alphas, ruler of the largest werewolf territory in the Northern Hemisphere. And he was watching me, as a hawk watches a field mouse. "Next," called out his second-in-command, a scarred warrior named Torek, who stood at the foot of the dais. I stepped forward, my heart hammering against my ribs. The ground seemed to tilt beneath my feet as I approached. 3 steps from the throne, I remembered the custom and dropped to one knee, head bowed, the way the human ambassador had instructed me. "The human healer from Ravenwood Village," Torek announced, his voice carrying a hint of disdain. I kept my eyes on the ground, on the worn leather of the king's boots. They were caked with mud, and something darker that I refused to consider too carefully. "Rise," came his voice, deep and resonant, like thunder rolling over distant mountains. I stood, but kept my gaze lowered. Around us, the pack had gone quiet, curious about this unusual interaction. Most offerings were acknowledged with a nod, sometimes a word of praise, before the next pack member was called. "Look at me." It wasn't said harshly, but there was no mistaking the command in it. I raised my eyes to his, trying to control the tremor in my hands. Up close, I could see the scars, one that cut through his right eyebrow, another that traced from his jaw down his neck, disappearing beneath the collar of his shirt. His dark hair was pulled back, revealing a face that was all harsh angles and unforgiving lines. "They say you healed the baker's son in Ravenwood," he said. A wound that should have taken his leg. I swallowed hard. "Yes, Alpha King." "And what do you offer to my pack?" This was the moment I'd rehearsed. I opened my satchel and pulled out a small wooden box. "Remedies for pain and fever. Poultices for wounds that resist your natural healing. Tinctures for—" "We have healers," interrupted Torek from beside the throne. I faltered, feeling the heat of embarrassment creep up my neck. Of course they did. What could I possibly offer that they didn't already have? "For wolves," I said quietly, then found a thread of courage. "Not for humans. Not for the servants and attendants who live among you. Not for the children who haven't shifted yet." Something flickered in the Alpha King's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or curiosity. "There's more," I continued, pulling out a small glass vial containing a silvery liquid. "This can numb the pain of silver poisoning long enough for it to be treated." Now I had his attention. Silver was one of the few things that could truly harm his kind, and treatments were rare and precious. "How did you come by this knowledge?" he asked, his voice dropping lower, making those nearby lean in to hear. My grandmother. She was healer to King Alaric, your father. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I hadn't planned to reveal this connection, but fear had loosened my tongue. The Alpha King's gaze sharpened. Helena's granddaughter? I nodded, surprised he knew my grandmother's name. She passed her knowledge to me before she died. He studied me for a long moment, and I had the distinct impression of being weighed and measured by those amber eyes. Then he extended his hand. I will accept your offering, healer. Relief flooded through me as I placed the wooden box and vial in his massive palm. Our fingers brushed, and a jolt of something, not quite electricity, not quite heat, shot up my arm. I jerked back, startled. His nostrils flared slightly, and I remembered too late what the ambassador had told me about werewolves and their sense of smell. They could detect emotions, fear, deception, desire. Whatever he'd sensed in that moment made his eyes narrow fractionally. You will attend the council meeting tomorrow, he said. Not a request. We have matters to discuss. Then he nodded to Torek, a clear dismissal. But as I turned to leave, I felt those eyes following me, burning into my back as I retreated to the shadows at the edge of the gathering. Later that night, I sat alone in the small cabin they'd assigned me. It was on the outskirts of the Pack's territory, not quite part of the community, not quite banished, a fitting place for someone who belonged nowhere. I unwrapped a piece of bread I'd been given and bit into it, finding little appetite despite having eaten nothing all day. My mind kept returning to the Alpha King's face, to the moment our skin had touched. There had been something in his eyes, recognition perhaps, or memory. A sharp knock at the door made me jump. I approached cautiously and opened it to find a young girl, perhaps 12, with wide eyes and a nervous expression. The Alpha King requests your presence, she said breathlessly. Now? I glanced outside at the darkness. It's the middle of the night. His daughter is sick, the girl explained. She's human, like you. The words hit me like a physical blow. His daughter. Human. The pieces began to arrange themselves in my mind, forming a picture I hadn't considered. Take me to her, I said, grabbing my grandmother's book and my satchel of supplies. The girl led me through the sleeping pack grounds to the Alpha's dwelling, a sprawling structure of stone and timber at the heart of the territory. Inside, the air was warm and scented with cedar. The girl guided me to a room where firelight spilled from beneath the door. In there, she whispered, then disappeared down the hallway. I knocked softly, then entered. The room was spacious, dominated by a large bed where a small figure lay beneath furs and blankets. Beside it, looking massive and out of place in a simple wooden chair, sat the Alpha King. He looked up when I entered, and in the firelight, his face seemed transformed. The hardness was still there, but overlaid with something I recognized immediately: parental worry. She's burning with fever, he said without preamble. It started after sunset. I approached the bed and saw a girl of perhaps 7 or 8 years. Her skin was flushed, her breathing labored. Her hair, pale blonde like mine, was damp with sweat. How long has she been your daughter? I asked quietly as I placed my hand on her forehead. The Alpha King's jaw tightened. She is not mine by birth. Her mother was important to me. When she died 3 winters ago, I claimed the child. I nodded, understanding the unspoken message, a human woman he had cared for. A child he had chosen to protect, despite her humanity, despite her being what his kind would consider a weakness. What's her name? I asked, opening my bag. Aurora, he said, and the way he spoke it, softly, as if the name itself were fragile, told me everything about his feelings for this child. I worked quietly, examining the girl, preparing a fever remedy. As I pressed a cool cloth to her forehead, Aurora's eyes fluttered open. They were a startling blue against her flushed skin. Who are you? She whispered. I'm Alara, I said, smiling gently. I'm going to help you feel better. Her gaze moved past me to the Alpha King, and her small hand reached for his. Despite his massive size, he took it with surprising gentleness. Father, she murmured, before her eyes closed again. Something shifted in my chest as I watched their hands, his engulfing hers completely, her fragile fingers trustingly curled around his. This fearsome ruler, this predator who commanded an army of wolves, reduced to silent worry by the fever of a human child. When I finished administering the medicine, I straightened and found the Alpha King watching me intently. "She'll sleep now," I said. "The fever should break by morning." He nodded, but didn't release Aurora's hand. "You were not what I expected, healer. I wasn't sure how to respond to that." "I should check on her in a few hours," I said instead. As I gathered my things, he spoke again. "You have no mate." It wasn't a question, and the suddenness of it startled me. "No, Alpha King." "Why not?" His directness was unsettling. I hesitated, then decided on honesty. Humans fear what I know of wolves. Wolves see little value in what I am. His expression remained impassive, but something flickered in those amber eyes. "You may go," he said finally. "Return at dawn." I nodded and moved toward the door. Just as I reached it, his voice stopped me. "Elara." I turned. It was the first time he'd spoken my name. "Thank you." The words seemed to cost him something. Pride, perhaps. I inclined my head in acknowledgement and slipped out the door, my mind racing with questions. About him, about Aurora, about why he'd really summoned me to his territory, and about the strange feeling that had settled in my chest when he'd spoken my name. Dawn arrived with fingers of pale gold stretching across the wooden floor of my cabin. I had barely slept, my mind circling around the Alpha King, his human daughter, and the invisible threads that seemed to be weaving us together. Outside, the pack was already stirring, voices calling, footsteps crunching on frost-covered ground. The world of predators never truly rested. I splashed cold water on my face, twisted my blonde hair into a simple braid, and gathered my healing supplies. The morning air bit at my skin as I made my way through the pack grounds toward the Alpha's dwelling. Pack members moved aside as I passed, their eyes following me with newfound curiosity. News traveled fast in a community bound by heightened senses and whispered secrets. At the entrance to the stone structure, I found Torek waiting, his scarred face unreadable. "The Alpha King is with the council," he said gruffly. "You're to see to the child and then wait." I nodded and followed him through the corridors until we reached Aurora's room. The little girl was sitting up in bed, her color much improved, spooning porridge into her mouth. She brightened when she saw me. "Elara," she exclaimed, as if we were old friends. "Father said you made the burning go away." I smiled, approaching the bed. "How are you feeling this morning?" "Better," she said, then lowered her voice conspiratorially. "Will you tell me a story while you check if I'm still sick? Father tries, but his stories always have too much fighting in them." Despite the tension that had been building in my chest, I laughed. The idea of the formidable Alpha King struggling to tell appropriate bedtime stories was unexpectedly endearing. "I think I can manage that." As I checked her temperature and examined her eyes, I told her about a clever rabbit who outsmarted a wolf, a tale my grandmother had told me. Aurora giggled at all the right moments, and I found myself relaxing in her presence. There was something about her, a brightness, a resilience, that made it impossible to maintain walls around her. "Are you going to stay with us now?" she asked when I'd finished my examination. The question caught me off guard. "I'm here to help your father's pack," I said carefully. "But you're like me," she persisted, her blue eyes wide and hopeful. "Human. Everyone else changes when the moon is full." I felt a pang in my chest. How lonely it must be for her, surrounded by creatures who were fundamentally different, who possessed strength and abilities she would never have. I recognized that loneliness. It mirrored my own. "I understand what that's like," I told her softly. Her small hand reached for mine. "Then you should stay. Father gets that look less when you're here." "What look?" "The sad, angry one, like when he stares at the mountains and doesn't think I notice." Before I could respond, the door opened and the Alpha King himself entered. Aurora immediately brightened. "Father! Elara told me a story about a rabbit who tricked a wolf." His eyes met mine over her head, one eyebrow raised slightly. "Did she now?" I felt heat rise to my cheeks. "The fever has broken," She should rest today, but I believe she'll be fully recovered by tomorrow. He nodded, then turned to Aurora. I need to speak with Alara. Nadia will bring you some books. As if summoned by his words, a young woman appeared in the doorway, carrying a stack of leather-bound volumes. Aurora sighed dramatically, but settled back against her pillows without protest. The Alpha King gestured for me to follow him. We walked in silence through the corridors until we reached what appeared to be his private study, walls lined with books, a massive desk of polished oak, and windows that looked out over the forest. He closed the door behind us. Your remedy worked quickly, he said, moving to stand by the window. Morning light caught in his dark hair, revealing streaks of silver I hadn't noticed before. Children usually respond well to the treatment. Their bodies haven't learned to resist yet. He turned to face me, those amber eyes studying me with unnerving intensity. You have questions. I hesitated, unsure of how far I could push. He might have thanked me last night, but he was still the Alpha King, a ruler accustomed to giving orders, not answering inquiries. Why did you summon me to your territory? I asked finally. The truth, Alpha King. Something like respect flickered across his face. Few people, I imagined, spoke to him so directly. Drake, he said. What? When we're alone, you may use it. He moved away from the window, closing the distance between us. I summoned you because of Aurora, because I knew your grandmother, and I trusted her skills. You could have sent for me when Aurora fell ill. Why bring me here before that? His jaw tightened. Because I knew it was coming. She falls ill every autumn, when the weather turns. The pack healer says it's because she's human. Weaker, more vulnerable to the changing seasons. But I've seen other human children in the territory. They don't suffer as she does. You think there's something else wrong with her? He nodded, his expression grim. And I think it's getting worse. I processed this information, pieces clicking into place. That's why you accepted my offering so readily. You need a human healer. Yes. The directness of his admission surprised me. I'd expected evasion, perhaps even anger at being questioned. Instead, he was looking at me with something like urgency. I'll need to examine her more thoroughly, I said. Observe her over time. You'll stay then. Again, not a question. I bristled slightly at his assumption. I haven't decided yet. His eyes narrowed, and for a moment I glimpsed the predator beneath the civilized exterior. Then, unexpectedly, his expression softened. Please, for Aurora. The word please from this man felt like a rare gem unearthed from stone, precious because of its scarcity. It made something twist inside me, a feeling I couldn't quite name. I'll stay until I understand what's causing her illness, I conceded. Relief flashed across his face before he masked it. Good. The council meeting is about to begin. You should attend. Why? Because if you're staying, the pack needs to accept you, and because there are matters being discussed that concern humans in our territory. I followed him through the corridors to a large chamber where several men and women were already seated around a circular table. They rose when Drake entered, inclining their heads in respect. Their eyes tracked to me, curiosity and suspicion evident in their gazes. This is Alara of Ravenwood, Drake announced as he took his seat at the head of the table. Granddaughter of Helena, healer to my father. She will be staying with us to attend to Aurora's health. A woman with striking silver hair spoke first. We welcome any who can aid the Alpha Princess, she said, though her tone suggested reservations, but there are security concerns to consider. Such as? I asked, taking the empty seat Drake had indicated. The human villages to the east have been growing increasingly hostile, said a burly man with a beard streaked with gray. They blame us for their missing livestock, their failed crops, and their missing daughters, added another council member, his voice bitter. As if we would want their women. I frowned. Have you tried diplomatic channels? Perhaps if... We've sent emissaries, interrupted the silver-haired woman. 3 of them. None returned. A chill ran through me. You believe they were killed? We know they were, said Drake, his voice tight with controlled anger. Their bodies were found at our borders 2 nights ago, with their throats cut and silver coins in their mouths. The implications sank in slowly. A declaration of war, I murmured. Yes. Drake's hands clenched on the table. And now we must decide how to respond. The discussion that followed was heated. Some council members advocated for immediate retaliation, a show of force to remind the humans of werewolf supremacy. Others urged caution, fearing that escalation would only lead to greater bloodshed. Throughout, I remained silent, absorbing the complex political dynamics. Drake, I noticed, listened more than he spoke, his eyes occasionally finding mine across the table. When he finally did speak, his words surprised me. Alara will accompany me to Eastholm tomorrow, he announced. We will attempt one final diplomatic approach before deciding on further action. A human at your side might be seen as weakness, objected Torek, who had been standing guard by the door. Drake's gaze hardened. Or it might remind them that we are capable of coexistence, that we choose it, when given the option. And if they take her hostage? Asked the silver-haired woman. Or worse. They won't, Drake said with quiet confidence, because they know what would follow. The council meeting adjourned shortly after, with plans set for our departure at first light the next day. As the others filed out, Drake motioned for me to remain. You didn't ask for my consent, I said when we were alone. To accompany you to Eastholm. He had the grace to look slightly abashed. Would you have refused? That's not the point. I met his gaze steadily. I'm not one of your subjects, Drake. I won't be commanded. He studied me for a long moment, and I had the distinct impression he was seeing something new in me, a backbone he hadn't expected. You're right, he said finally. I apologize. The words seemed foreign on his tongue, as if they were rarely used. Something in my expression must have conveyed my surprise, because a corner of his mouth lifted slightly. Contrary to what you might think, he said, I am capable of acknowledging when I'm wrong. Is that a common occurrence? I asked, unable to help myself. To my astonishment, he laughed, a brief, rusty sound, as if awakening after a long dormancy. Less common than it should be, according to my advisors. The moment of levity passed quickly, replaced by the gravity of our situation. Why do you really want me to go to Eastholm? I asked. His expression sobered. Because you understand both worlds, Alara. Because you might see solutions where I see only threats. The honesty of his answer disarmed me. I nodded slowly. I'll go, but I need time with Aurora first, to understand her condition better, of course. He hesitated, then added, She likes you. She doesn't trust easily. Not after her mother. He trailed off, pain flashing across his face before he could mask it. What happened to her mother? I asked gently. Ileana was killed by her own kind, he said, his voice hardening. Humans who discovered she had taken a werewolf lover. They called it purification. Horror washed over me. Aurora witnessed this? He nodded, his eyes distant with memory. She was hiding in a cupboard, heard everything, saw everything when they finally left. That's why you took her in. I loved Ileana, he said simply, and Aurora is all that remains of her. The rawness of his admission hung in the air between us. In that moment, the Alpha King wasn't a fearsome ruler or a predator. He was simply a man who had lost someone he loved and was trying to protect what remained of her. I'll do everything I can for her, I promised. Something passed between us then, an understanding. A fragile bridge across the vast differences that separated our worlds. His amber eyes held mine, and for a heartbeat, I glimpsed the man beneath the crown. Wounded, resilient, and far more complex than I had initially believed. Thank you, he said quietly. As I left the council chamber, I felt the weight of his gaze following me, and with it, the growing certainty that I had stepped into something larger and more dangerous than I had ever imagined. Block 3. The journey to Eastholm began in the gray light before dawn. A light mist clung to the forest floor, transforming the familiar into something ethereal and uncertain. I'd spent most of the previous day with Aurora, conducting a more thorough examination and learning what I could about her recurring illness. The little girl had been delighted by the attention, chattering about her life in the pack and asking endless questions about my own upbringing in Ravenwood. Will you be safe with Father? She'd asked when I told her about our planned journey. The question had struck me. This child's concern for my safety when traveling with one of the most dangerous predators in the territory. Now, as I mounted the horse they'd provided me, a gentle mare with a chestnut coat. I wondered the same thing. Not about physical safety. I had no doubt that Drake would protect me from external threats, but my heart, my emotions, those felt increasingly vulnerable in his presence. He rode beside me on a massive black stallion, his posture relaxed, yet vigilant. We were accompanied by 4 pack members, including Torek, who had made his disapproval of my presence abundantly clear. The small party moved through the forest with the silent efficiency of predators, while I fought to keep my horse from stumbling over exposed roots and uneven ground. "You ride well," Drake observed, as we emerged onto a wider path where we could travel side by side. "My father insisted," I replied. "He said a healer needs to reach those who cannot come to her." "Your father was a wise man." "He was," I agreed, surprised by the pang of grief that still accompanied thoughts of him. "He died defending our village from raiders 5 winters ago." Drake's expression darkened. "Human raiders?" "Yes, desperate men made cruel by hunger and fear." I met his gaze steadily. "Cruelty isn't exclusive to any one species, Alpha King." He inclined his head slightly, acknowledging the point. "And courage, it seems, is similarly universal." The unexpected compliment warmed me despite the morning chill. We rode in companionable silence for a time, the forest gradually giving way to rolling hills dotted with farmsteads. In the distance, the walls of Eastholm rose like pale sentinels against the landscape. "Tell me about the leadership in Eastholm," I said as we approached. "Who holds the real power?" "Officially, Lord Edmund Blackwell governs the region," Drake replied, "but the true influence lies with Brother Thaddeus, head of the Order of Silver Light." "Religious zealots?" His mouth twisted in a grimace. "They believe werewolves are abominations, demons in flesh. They've been gaining support throughout the eastern villages for the past 2 years. "And your emissaries? Were they killed by the Order?" "Almost certainly, though Blackwell will deny it." Drake's hands tightened on the reins. "The Silver Light preaches purification through blood. They've been conducting what they call cleansings in villages where humans and werewolves have lived peacefully for generations." A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the morning air. "Like what happened to Ilyana?" His jaw clenched, a muscle ticking beneath the skin. "Yes." As we drew closer to Eastholm's walls, the tension in our small party became palpable. Farmers in the fields stopped their work to stare at us, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. A small group of children playing near the road scattered like startled birds at our approach. One little boy making a warding gesture I recognized from my own village. Protection against evil spirits. Guards at the city gate challenged us, their hands resting meaningfully on sword hilts. I saw their eyes widen when they recognized Drake, fear and hatred warring in their expressions. "State your business, Wolf," said the captain, deliberately omitting Drake's title. Before Drake could respond, I urged my horse forward. "We come at the invitation of Lord Blackwell." I lied smoothly. "I am Alara of Ravenwood, healer, here to consult on matters of mutual concern." The captain's eyes narrowed. "And these creatures?" "My escorts," I said firmly. As befits an envoy between territories. The lie was a gamble, but I'd calculated that the guards would be reluctant to turn away a human healer, especially one claiming connection to their lord. After a tense moment, the captain nodded curtly and signaled for the gates to be opened. As we passed through, Drake leaned closer to me. "Quick thinking," he murmured, his breath warm against my ear. "It seemed better than starting a diplomatic mission with bloodshed," I replied dryly. A hint of a smile touched his lips before his expression returned to its usual watchful neutrality. Eastholm was larger than Ravenwood, its streets bustling with merchants, craftsmen, and townsfolk going about their daily business. The city had an orderly feel to it. Buildings arranged in neat rows, streets swept clean, guards posted at regular intervals. Yet there was something oppressive in that order, something that made my skin prickle uncomfortably. We hadn't ridden far when I noticed the first shrine, a small alcove set into a building's wall, containing a silver sword and a carving of a wolf's head impaled on a stake. Similar shrines appeared throughout the city, some elaborate, others simple, but all featuring the same disturbing imagery. "The Order's work," Drake said quietly, following my gaze. They've been spreading their message throughout the city. We continued toward the central square, where a large stone building dominated the skyline, Lord Blackwell's residence. Before we could reach it, however, a commotion ahead drew our attention. A crowd had gathered in the square, surrounding a wooden platform where a man in silver robes stood. His voice, powerful and resonant, carried across the space. "The beasts walk among us, wearing human skin to deceive us. But the light of truth reveals their corruption," the crowd murmured in response, some nodding fervently, others looking uncertain. On the platform beside the speaker stood a young woman, perhaps 18, her wrists bound before her. Her face was bruised, her expression terrified. "This girl," continued the man in silver, "consorted with the wolf demons, allowed herself to be defiled by their touch." Horror and fury rose within me as I realized what was happening. A trial, or rather, a public condemnation disguised as justice. The speaker could only be Brother Thaddeus, and the girl. My stomach clenched as I remembered Drake's words about Ilyana. I glanced at him and saw the rage in his eyes, the tension in every line of his body. His hand had moved to the hilt of his sword. Torek and the other wolves had similarly stiffened, ready for violence. "Wait," I said urgently, touching Drake's arm. "If you intervene with force, it will only confirm everything he's saying about werewolves. It will be the war you came to prevent." His eyes met mine, wild with barely contained fury. "I will not stand by while they murder an innocent girl for the crime of loving one of our kind." "Then let me try something first," I pleaded. "Give me 5 minutes before you draw your sword." A battle waged in his expression, but finally he gave a short nod. 5 minutes. I dismounted and handed my reins to one of our party, then moved through the crowd toward the platform. People shifted aside, perhaps responding to some quality in my determined stride, or simply curious about this stranger moving so purposefully toward the center of attention. Brother Thaddeus continued his tirade, his face flushed with religious fervor. Up close, I could see he was younger than I'd expected, perhaps 30, with sharp features and eyes that burned with conviction. "The penalty for corruption is purification by silver and fire," he proclaimed, producing a dagger with a gleaming blade. I reached the front of the crowd and raised my voice. "What evidence supports these accusations, Brother Thaddeus?" The crowd murmured in surprise as all eyes turned to me. Thaddeus stared down, momentarily thrown by the interruption. "Who dares question the judgment of the Order?" he demanded. I stepped forward, projecting a confidence I didn't entirely feel. "Ilara of Ravenwood, healer of the Northern Territories. I come in the name of truth and fairness, values I believe Eastholm holds dear." The mention of my profession caused a subtle shift in the crowd's energy. Healers were respected, needed, and I was counting on that cultural deference. "This matter does not concern outsiders," Thaddeus said, but I detected uncertainty in his voice. "Justice should withstand scrutiny," I replied, my voice carrying across the square. "If this girl is guilty, surely the evidence against her will convince even a neutral observer." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. I could feel Drake's presence behind me, a dangerous energy held in check only by his promise. Thaddeus's eyes narrowed. "The evidence is clear. She was seen leaving the city at night, meeting a beast in human form at the edge of the forest." "By whom was she seen?" I asked. "A righteous member of our community who wishes to remain anonymous." I turned to address the crowd directly. "Where I come from, accusations without named witnesses have no weight. Is justice in Eastholm built on whispers and shadows?" More murmurs, some supportive. I pressed my advantage. "And even if she did meet someone in the forest, what proof is there that he was a werewolf? Did this anonymous witness see a transformation? Or is the Order asking you to condemn this girl to death based on speculation?" Thaddeus's face darkened with anger. "The corruption is evident to those with eyes to see. The girl bears the mark of the beast." "Show us this mark," called someone from the crowd, emboldened by my questions. Thaddeus gestured sharply, and one of his acolytes yanked down the collar of the girl's dress, exposing her shoulder. There, barely visible, was a small crescent-shaped scar. "The bite of a wolf demon," Thaddeus proclaimed triumphantly. I climbed the steps to the platform, ignoring the acolytes who moved to block me. "Allow me to examine this so-called mark," I said, with all the authority I could muster. Thaddeus hesitated, aware that refusing would undermine his position. Finally, he nodded curtly. I approached the girl, whose eyes were wide with fear. "It's all right," I said softly. "I'm here to help." She trembled as I examined the mark on her shoulder, but remained still. After a moment, I straightened and addressed the crowd. "This is not a werewolf bite," I announced confidently. "I've treated actual werewolf attacks. The scars they leave are distinctive and unmistakable. This is a common cooking burn, probably from a hot pot rim. Any experienced healer would confirm my assessment." Uncertainty spread through the crowd. I turned to Thaddeus. "Unless the order now condemns young women for kitchen accidents," anger flashed in his eyes, but he was losing the crowd and he knew it. "The girl consorted with enemies of humanity. She betrayed her kind. Did she?" I challenged. "Or did she simply love someone you taught her to fear? Is love now a crime in Eastholm?" The girl's eyes filled with tears, and I knew I'd struck the truth. "The law is clear," Thaddeus insisted, though with less conviction. "Those who ally with beasts share their fate. And what of those who foster hatred between neighbors?" I countered. "What of those who twist faith into a weapon? What punishment does your law prescribe for them?" The crowd had grown restless, divisions appearing as people argued among themselves. I could feel the momentum shifting away from bloodlust toward uncertainty. "This girl has committed no crime worthy of death," I said, raising my voice to be heard over the growing discord. "If Eastholm is truly a place of justice and law, then prove it now. Show mercy where cruelty is unwarranted." For a long moment, the square hung in balance. Then a voice from the back called out, "Let her go." Others joined in, the calls growing louder. "Release her! No crime! No crime!" Thaddeus's face contorted with rage, but he was losing control of the situation. Before he could respond, another voice cut through the clamor, deep, authoritative, impossible to ignore. "Lord Blackwell approaches." The crowd parted as a middle-aged man in fine clothes rode into the square, flanked by guards. His expression was thunderous as he surveyed the scene. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, dismounting. "I gave no authorization for a public trial." Thaddeus bowed, though I noted the stiffness in his posture. "My lord, we were merely exposing corruption within our walls, without my knowledge or consent." Blackwell cut him off sharply. His gaze moved to me, then to the bound girl. "Release her. Now." The acolytes hesitated, looking to Thaddeus, who stared at Blackwell with barely concealed hatred before giving a curt nod. They untied the girl's hands, and she immediately backed away from them, rubbing her wrists. Blackwell turned to the crowd. "Return to your homes and businesses. This spectacle is concluded." Slowly, reluctantly, the people began to disperse. I guided the girl down from the platform where Drake waited. His face was composed, but I could see the rage still simmering beneath the surface. "Are you all right?" I asked the girl softly. She nodded, her eyes darting fearfully between Drake and Blackwell. "Thank you," she whispered. "Where can you go?" I asked. "Is there somewhere safe?" "My aunt's house in the lower quarter," she said. She's not like them." "Go there now," I advised. "Stay inside for a few days." She nodded again, then slipped away into the thinning crowd. I watched her go, hoping I hadn't simply postponed her fate rather than changing it. Lord Blackwell approached us, his gaze lingering on Drake with undisguised wariness. "Alpha King," he said with a stiff nod. "Your presence in Eastholm is unexpected, as was the spectacle we just witnessed." Drake replied coolly. "Is this how Eastholm now treats its young women? With public accusations and threatened execution?" Blackwell's jaw tightened. "The order has grown, zealous in its interpretation of the law. I assure you I had no knowledge of this event. Yet the order operates within your walls, with your tacit permission," Drake observed. Tension crackled between the two men. I stepped forward, offering Blackwell a respectful nod. "My lord, we came seeking dialogue on the increasing tensions between our territories. Perhaps we could continue this conversation in a more private setting." Blackwell studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Follow me to my residence. We have much to discuss, it seems. As we moved through the square, I felt Drake's hand at the small of my back. Warm, steady, protective. That was brave, he said quietly, and effective. It was necessary, I replied, equally soft. For her and for us all. His amber eyes held mine, something new in their depths. You continue to surprise me, Alara of Ravenwood. The weight of his gaze, the warmth of his hand, the resonance of my name on his lips. All of it stirred something within me that I wasn't ready to examine too closely. We had a diplomatic mission to complete, a fragile peace to maintain if possible. And yet, as we walked toward Lord Blackwell's residence, I couldn't help but feel that something fundamental had shifted between us. A recognition of shared purpose, perhaps, or something deeper that neither of us had anticipated when this journey began. Lord Blackwell's residence was a study in calculated intimidation. High ceilings, stone walls adorned with weaponry, guards stationed at every doorway. The message was clear. Power resided here, and it was not to be challenged. We were led to a council chamber where a large oak table dominated the space, surrounded by high-backed chairs carved with the Blackwell family crest. "Please, be seated," Blackwell said, gesturing to the chairs as servants brought wine and bread. I noticed he positioned himself at the end of the table opposite Drake, maintaining maximum distance between himself and the Alpha King. Torek and the other wolves remained standing, forming a protective semicircle behind Drake. I took the seat to his right, acutely aware of the tension filling the room like smoke. "I must apologize for your reception in our city," Blackwell began, his tone carefully diplomatic. "The Order of Silver Light provides spiritual guidance to many of our citizens, but they sometimes exceed their authority." "Spiritual guidance that preaches hatred and violence," Drake said flatly. 3 of my emissaries were murdered, their bodies mutilated with silver. Is this also the work of those who have exceeded their authority? Blackwell's face betrayed nothing, but I noticed his hands tighten around his wine goblet. "I assure you, if anyone from Eastholm was involved in such an act, they will face justice. Your assurances mean little when the streets of your city are lined with shrines calling for our extinction," Drake countered. I placed a gentle hand on Drake's arm, feeling the coiled tension in his muscles. "My lord," I said, addressing Blackwell, "the growing hostility threatens both our peoples. Surely there must be a way to restore the peace that existed before." Blackwell's gaze shifted to me, seeming almost relieved to have someone else to address. "Peace requires trust, healer, and trust has been damaged. There have been attacks on our outlying farms, livestock slaughtered, families terrorized, not by my pack," Drake said firmly. "Perhaps not directly," Blackwell conceded. "But there are lone wolves, rogues who answer to no alpha. The common people cannot distinguish between them and your governed packs. They see only the threat, and the Order exploits that fear," I observed. Blackwell sighed, suddenly looking older and more weary. "Brother Thaddeus offers simple answers to complex problems: protection from monsters, salvation through purity. Many find comfort in such certainties, while others die for them," Drake said coldly. The conversation circled for nearly an hour, neither man willing to cede ground, both constrained by forces larger than themselves. I listened carefully, noting what remained unsaid as much as what was openly discussed. Blackwell, I realized, was not the zealot Thaddeus was, but neither was he strong enough to oppose the Order directly. He was a man caught between rising religious fervor and ancient treaties, trying to navigate waters that grew more treacherous by the day. As the meeting drew to its inconclusive end, Blackwell made an unexpected offer. "Stay the night as my guests. The journey back to your territory would be dangerous in darkness, and it would give us opportunity to continue our discussions in the morning." Drake and Torek exchanged a glance laden with suspicion. I could read their thoughts. Trap, ambush, betrayal. "We accept your hospitality," I said before either could refuse, earning a sharp look from Drake. A night of rest would benefit us all. Blackwell nodded, perhaps relieved, and called for servants to show us to our quarters. As we followed them through the stone corridors, Drake drew close to me. "That was reckless," he murmured. his breath warm against my ear. We're vulnerable here, or we have an opportunity, I countered softly, to learn more, to find leverage. Leaving now would only confirm Blackwell's belief that dialogue is impossible. His amber eyes searched mine, and I felt that strange connection again, like a thread pulled taut between us. Finally, he nodded. Stay alert. Trust no one. Except you? The words slipped out before I could stop them. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. Except me. We were given adjacent chambers in the east wing of the residence. Mine was comfortable if sparse. A bed with clean linens, a washing basin, a small writing desk beneath a window that overlooked the city. Drake insisted on checking the room thoroughly before allowing me to remain alone, examining the window locks and the heavy wooden door. I'll be right next door, he said, when he was satisfied. If anything happens, anything at all, call for me. The concern in his voice warmed something in my chest. I will. After he left, I sat at the window, watching as twilight descended over Eastholm. Lights flickered to life across the city, candles in windows, torches along the streets. From this height, it looked peaceful, ordinary. It was hard to reconcile that tranquil vista with the hatred we'd witnessed in the square, the shrine images of impaled wolves. A soft knock at the door startled me from my thoughts. I approached cautiously. Who is it? A message from Lord Blackwell, came the reply. A woman's voice soft and deferential. I opened the door to find a maidservant holding a folded piece of parchment sealed with wax. My lady, she said with a small curtsy, offering the message. I thanked her and closed the door, breaking the seal. The message was brief. Meet me in the garden at midnight. Come alone, there is more you must know. It was signed with Blackwell's seal rather than his name. Suspicion flared immediately. Why the secrecy? What couldn't be said in front of Drake? I debated whether to show him the note, but something held me back. If this was truly important information, something Blackwell was afraid to share openly, it could be crucial to our mission. I waited until the residence grew quiet, the hour approaching midnight. Then I slipped from my room, moving silently through the darkened corridors. I'd mapped the route to the gardens earlier, noting the positions of guards and potential escape paths, a habit my father had taught me long ago. Always know your way out, Alara. The night air was cool against my skin as I stepped into the gardens. Stone pathways wound between carefully tended beds, now shadowy and indistinct in the darkness. A fountain burbled softly at the center, its water gleaming silver in the moonlight. Lord Blackwell? I called softly, scanning the shadows. Movement caught my eye, a figure emerging from beneath a stone archway. But it wasn't Blackwell. The silver robes gleamed dully in the moonlight, the face beneath the hood twisted with malice. Brother Thaddeus. I turned to flee, but strong hands seized me from behind. An acolyte, hidden in the shadows, now pinned my arms. The wolf's whore, Thaddeus said, his voice dripping with contempt. Did you think we wouldn't recognize what you are? Who you serve? I struggled against my captor's grip. Lord Blackwell is weak, Thaddeus spat. Too afraid of the beasts to do what must be done. But the Order understands. The corruption must be purged, the humanity cleansed. He produced a silver dagger, the same one he'd intended to use on the girl in the square. Your interference today upset the natural order, but the silver light finds a way. Always. Fear flooded my veins, but I forced myself to think. They hadn't gagged me. That meant they weren't concerned about my screams being heard, which meant we were either too far from help or, "You won't kill me here," I said, keeping my voice steady, despite the terror clawing at my throat. "You need me alive for something." Thaddeus smiled, the expression chilling in its gentleness. "Perceptive. Yes, you have a greater purpose to serve. The Alpha King has shown unusual interest in you. His reaction to your disappearance will prove what we have long claimed, that beasts cannot control their violent nature. You want to provoke him into attacking Eastholm," I realized aloud. "To start the war you've been pushing for." "Wars purify," Thaddeus said simply. "They separate the righteous from the corrupt, and when the blood has dried, a new world will emerge. Cleansed of abominations, the acolyte began dragging me backward, toward a small door in the garden wall. I knew what waited beyond, more of the order. A quick journey out of the city, and then I didn't want to contemplate what would follow. Desperation surged through me. I went limp suddenly, becoming dead weight in the acolyte's arms. The unexpected move caused him to stumble, his grip loosening momentarily. It was enough. I drove my elbow hard into his solar plexus, heard the whoosh of breath leaving his lungs. As he doubled over, I broke free and ran. "Stop her," Thaddeus hissed. I sprinted through the garden, abandoning stealth for speed. Behind me, I heard the pursuing footsteps, the angry whispers. The residence loomed ahead, windows mostly dark except for a few flickering with candlelight. I aimed for the nearest door, praying it would be unlocked. Something whistled past my ear. A throwing knife, embedding itself in the wooden doorframe inches from my face. I stumbled, nearly falling, but managed to wrench the door open and throw myself inside. "Help!" I shouted, my voice echoing in the stone corridor. "Guards!" Footsteps pounded behind me as I raced through the unfamiliar hallways, taking turns at random, seeking only distance from my pursuers. I rounded a corner and collided with a solid form, hands gripping my shoulders to steady me. "Ilara?" Relief crashed through me at the sound of Drake's voice. His eyes widened at whatever he saw in my face, then hardened as he looked past me to the corridor beyond. "What happened?" he demanded, positioning himself between me and the direction I'd come from. "Thaddeus," I gasped, struggling to catch my breath. "Ambush in the garden. They wanted to use me to provoke you." A low growl rumbled in his chest, primal and threatening. His eyes flared with inner light, and I caught a glimpse of the wolf beneath the man, rage barely contained by human form. "Stay behind me," he ordered. His voice deepened to something barely human. Torek appeared from another corridor, instantly alert to the tension. "Alpha? Find the others," Drake commanded. "We're leaving, now." As if summoned by his words, shouts erupted from elsewhere in the residence, guards mobilizing, alarm spreading. Whatever secrecy Thaddeus had planned had been shattered by my escape. "This way," Drake said, taking my hand firmly in his. His skin burned hot against mine, the predator in him close to the surface. We moved swiftly through the residence, Drake's preternatural senses guiding us away from approaching guards and toward the stables where our horses waited. Torek rejoined us with the other pack members, all of them moving with the coordinated precision of a hunting unit. "Blackwell has ordered the gates sealed," Torek reported tersely. "The order is claiming we attacked one of their acolytes. Can we reach the eastern gate before they secure it?" Drake asked. Torek nodded. "If we move now." The night dissolved into a blur of motion, mounting horses in the darkened stable, racing through side streets, avoiding patrol units that had begun to mobilize throughout the city. Drake kept me close, his body tense with vigilance, his eyes constantly scanning for threats. As we approached the eastern gate, we saw it was already partially closed, guards rushing to complete the process. "We need a distraction," Drake said grimly. Before anyone could respond, a voice called out from the shadows of a nearby alleyway. "This way, quickly!" A small figure beckoned urgently, the girl from the square, her face half hidden by a hooded cloak. Drake hesitated only a moment before directing our party toward her. She led us through a narrow passage between buildings, then to a small, concealed doorway in the city wall. "The old smuggler's exit," she explained hurriedly. "The order doesn't know about it." She pushed at the door, which groaned but swung open, revealing the moonlit countryside beyond. "Why help us?" Drake asked, studying her intently. She looked up at him, unafraid despite knowing what he was. "Because you didn't let them kill me. Because the woman with you showed me that courage doesn't always roar." Something passed between them, an understanding, a recognition. Drake nodded solemnly. "What is your name?" "Lyra," she said. "If you ever need sanctuary, Lyra, my territory is open to you." She smiled briefly, then gestured toward the opening. "Go. They'll be searching the main roads. Head for the river and follow it north. The patrols rarely venture there." We slipped through the doorway one by one, emerging onto a grassy slope that led down toward darkened fields. As I passed through, Lyra caught my hand. "Thank you," she whispered. for making them see me as a person, not just a heretic. I squeezed her hand. Be careful. The Order won't forget either of us. She nodded, understanding the warning, then released me and stepped back, closing the door behind us. We rode hard through the night, following the river's winding path northward as Lyra had suggested. The moonlight turned the landscape into a monochrome painting: silver water, black trees, gray fields stretching into darkness. Behind us, the distant lights of Eastholm gradually faded, though I couldn't shake the feeling of pursuit, the phantom pressure of Thaddeus's hatred at our backs. Dawn found us deep in the borderlands between territories, a no-man's land of rolling hills and scattered copses that belonged to neither human nor werewolf domain. Drake finally called a halt beside a small stream, allowing the horses to rest and drink. We should be safe here for a short time, he said, surveying our surroundings with wary eyes. The Order won't venture this far without a larger force. I slid from my horse, my muscles aching from the long night's ride. Exhaustion pulled at my limbs, but my mind remained alert, replaying the events in Eastholm, the fanaticism in Thaddeus's eyes, the casual way he spoke of purification through bloodshed. A shiver ran through me despite the growing warmth of the morning sun. Drake approached, offering a water skin. "Drink," he said softly. "You need it." I accepted gratefully, our fingers brushing in the exchange. Something had shifted between us during our flight from Eastholm, a barrier dissolved, a distance closed. Perhaps it was the shared danger or the moment he'd found me in that corridor. Fear and relief mingling in his eyes. "What will happen now?" I asked after drinking deeply. "With Eastholm, with the Order." His expression darkened. "War is coming, Alara. Perhaps not tomorrow or the next day, but soon. Thaddeus won't stop until he has his cleansing." "And Blackwell? Do you think he knew about the ambush?" Drake considered this, his amber eyes distant with thought. "No, Blackwell is a politician, not a zealot. He wants to maintain his power, which means avoiding open conflict for as long as possible, but he's losing control to the Order." "Yes." Drake's jaw tightened, and that makes him dangerous in a different way. A desperate man may take desperate actions. We rested for an hour before continuing our journey, now moving with less urgency but no less caution. The territory around us gradually became more familiar, landmarks I recognized from our outward journey, the landscape shifting subtly as we neared werewolf lands. As we rode, Drake kept close to my side, our conversations flowing more easily than before. He told me of his childhood under his father's harsh rule, of the responsibilities thrust upon him when he became Alpha King. I shared stories of my grandmother and her wisdom, of learning to navigate between the human and werewolf worlds. She never feared them, I explained as we crested a hill that offered views of the distant mountains. My grandmother saw werewolves as simply another form of life, different, but not lesser or greater. She taught me to look beyond form to essence. "And what essence do you see in me, Alara?" Drake asked, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. I turned to him, studying his face in the clear light of day. The strength in his features, yes, but also the complexity, the capacity for tenderness I'd witnessed with Aurora. "I see someone who carries the weight of his people," I said honestly. "Someone who can be fierce in protection and gentle in care. Someone who knows what it is to love and to lose, and chooses to love anyway." Something vulnerable flickered in his eyes, there and gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "And does that frighten you?" he asked. "Less each day," I admitted softly. We made camp that night in a sheltered valley, still a half-day's ride from the pack territory. The others maintained a respectful distance as Drake and I sat beside the small fire, the night deepening around us. Stars appeared overhead, countless pinpricks of light in the vast darkness. "Aurora will be worried," I said, thinking of the little girl with her bright eyes and curious questions. "She's strong," Drake replied, though I heard the underlying concern in his voice. "Stronger than most realize, like her father," I observed. He looked at me sharply. "I am not her father by blood." "Being a father is more than blood," I said gently. "It's protection, guidance, love. By that measure, you are every bit her father." The firelight played across his features, softening the hard edges, revealing the man beneath the Alpha King. "When Ileana died," he said quietly, I thought I had lost everything worth fighting for. Then I found Aurora hiding in that cupboard, terrified, covered in her mother's blood. She looked at me, at what I am, and wasn't afraid. She reached for me. The vulnerability in his voice made my heart ache. I reached out impulsively, covering his hand with mine. His skin was warm, always warmer than human temperature, and rough with the calluses of a warrior. In that moment, he continued, I made a vow to protect her, to give her the life Ilyana would have wanted for her. What I didn't expect was how she would change me. How she would heal parts of me I thought were beyond repair. Children have that power, I murmured. His eyes met mine across the flames. Ilyana couldn't give me children of my own. Our kinds can love, but rarely reproduce together. It was a sorrow she carried, though I told her it didn't matter. Understanding dawned slowly. In Eastholm, Thaddeus called me the wolf's whore, I said. He assumed that you and I... Yes. Drake's gaze remained steady on mine. What happens between an alpha and a human woman is considered an abomination by the Order, a corruption of natural law. Is that how you see it? I asked, my heart beating faster despite myself. No. The word was simple, but carried the weight of conviction. I see it as one soul recognizing another, regardless of form. The moment stretched between us, taut with unspoken possibilities. Then, with gentle deliberateness, Drake turned his hand beneath mine, interlacing our fingers. When I saw you running down that corridor in Eastholm, he said, his voice deepening. When I smelled your fear and thought what might have happened, he broke off, struggling with the intensity of the memory. I would have torn down the entire city to keep you safe, Alara. That is the truth of what I feel. The raw honesty of his confession took my breath away. I had been drawn to him from the beginning, though I'd tried to deny it. The powerful Alpha King with his complexity and contradiction, his capacity for both violence and tenderness. I can't give you pups, I whispered, echoing the words from an old fear, a boundary I'd always believed uncrossable. I'm human. Our kinds rarely... I already have enough of them, he interrupted gently, a smile touching his lips. A pack full of wolves who need leading. Aurora, who needs a mother more than I need more children. The implication of his words hung in the air between us. A mother. A role he could see me filling. The pack would never accept a human as their alpha's mate, I said, voicing another fear. They already begin to, he countered. You saved the girl in Eastholm. You faced Thaddeus without flinching. Torek himself speaks of your courage. He squeezed my hand gently, and they see how Aurora looks at you, how I look at you. And how is that? I asked, hardly daring to breathe. With hope, he said simply. With the recognition that sometimes fate brings us not what we thought we wanted, but what we truly need. In the distance, a wolf howled. A long, haunting note that echoed across the valley. Another answered, then another. A chorus rising into the night sky. Drake listened, his head tilted slightly, a smile spreading slowly across his face. What is it? I asked. They're welcoming us home, he explained. The scouts have spotted us. They're telling the pack that their alpha returned safely. Home. The word resonated within me unexpectedly. I thought of Aurora waiting, of the small cabin I'd been given, of the work that had only just begun, understanding Aurora's illness, finding my place among the pack, navigating the coming storm with the Order. As if reading my thoughts, Drake spoke again. Whatever comes, Alara, we will face it together. The hatred of the Order, the politics of Blackwell, the challenges within the pack itself. None of it will be easy. Nothing worth having ever is, I replied, echoing another of my grandmother's favorite sayings. He stood, drawing me up with him, our hands still intertwined. In the moonlight, his eyes gleamed with an inner light, the wolf and the man in perfect harmony. I cannot offer you an easy life, or a safe one, he said. But I can promise you this. You will never face the darkness alone again. The certainty in his voice, the steadiness of his presence beside me, filled a hollow space inside that I hadn't realized existed until that moment. I had always been the outsider, the one who existed between worlds, belonging nowhere entirely. But looking up at Drake, feeling the warmth of his hand around mine. I understood that perhaps belonging wasn't about place, but about connection, about finding someone who saw all of you and chose you anyway. Neither will you, I promised, reaching up to touch his face, tracing the scar that cut through his eyebrow. Face the darkness alone. His free hand came up to cover mine, holding it against his cheek. For a heartbeat, we stood there, poised on the edge of something new and fragile and powerful. Then Drake lowered his head, and his lips met mine. The kiss was gentle at first, almost tentative, the fearsome Alpha King approaching this moment with unexpected tenderness. Then it deepened, becoming something more urgent, more primal. I felt the rumble of a growl in his chest, felt the careful restraint in his powerful frame as he held me close, but not too tight, always conscious of his strength against my human fragility. When we finally parted, both breathless, I saw the amber of his eyes had brightened, the wolf closer to the surface. "We should return to the pack," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Aurora is waiting." I nodded, unable to find words for the feelings coursing through me. But as we moved to rejoin the others, I kept my hand in his, no longer afraid of what that connection might mean, or the future it promised. Behind us, the fire burned low, casting our shadows long across the ground. Two figures, different in form but united in purpose, walking together toward home.